Here we Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to Food Processing Skills Canada's Speaking Food webinar series. My name is Tracy Bernacchi-Duza, and I am the Senior Project Manager at Food Processing Skills Canada. I'd like to introduce you to Nicole Haney. Nicole is an award-winning business leader, educator, and keynote speaker with over a decade of experience in strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and leadership development. In 2015, Nicole left her desk job to pursue her passion for health food, founding a bakery that would quickly grow into a national energy bar company within just 4 years. Her remarkable success in building a national brand earned her recognition as one of the top 20 under 40 for her business achievements. Nicole later transitioned into teaching, becoming a top-rated business professor at Fanshawe College, while also working as a business and leadership consultant. Through her consulting work, she empowers individuals and organizations to develop exceptional leadership skills and achieve outstanding results. With a wealth of expertise in entrepreneurship and leadership, Nicole now speaks to audiences worldwide, including at prestigious institutions like Ivy Business School, California State University, and SBDC New York. Her dynamic approach to leadership and business inspires individuals and organizations to build stronger teams and drive lasting success. Please welcome Nicole Haney.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tracy, for such a phenomenal introduction. I am so excited to share this presentation with you guys today. So just going to share my screen to get started here, and we will dive into today's presentation. Okay, so today we are talking about leading with resilience during challenging times. And Tracy, you guys can see my slides? We're good?
Yeah, you're
Okay,
good to go. Thanks, Nicole.
amazing. So in terms of an agenda, I'm going to start out with a brief introduction and tell you a little bit about my journey so that you have an understanding of where my experience is coming from and why it is I'm here talking to you guys today about how to lead with resilience. Then we're going to talk about our currently changing landscape. So what is going on right now in today's landscape and some of the challenges that we are all facing. Before I share with you 3 key practices that you can use to lead your team through this challenging time successfully, how to do so with resilience yourself, and how to actually help your team build resilience as well at the same time. So to get started, I'm Nicole, and I am a business professor. I am a business and leadership consultant and a keynote speaker. But prior to being in the business, education, and consulting space, as Tracy mentioned, I was actually scaling a packaged food business full-time for just under 5 years. So that business started all the way back in 2015. And at the time, I had been working in just a regular desk job. I was in a corporate job. I was working in a beige cubicle. My work felt very beige. My life felt very beige. And I just was looking for something that would be more exciting, more adventurous, and more fulfilling in my career. I didn't know what that was going to be at that time. But what I did know is that I'm very into health and wellness. So I eat a clean whole food diet. I work out every single day. Being a healthy person is a huge part of my identity and a huge part of my life. And so I knew that I wanted something in the health and wellness space. And so I'm really into health and wellness, but I also really love dessert. I love cakes, cookies, cheesecake, brownies, cupcakes, anything sweet, you put it in front of me, I'm probably going to devour it. But those two things typically do not go hand in hand, right? So living a very healthy lifestyle and eating cake every night after dinner. So I have been out there on the market looking around for baked goods that were made in a healthier way. So I wanted something that was gluten-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free, 100% all natural ingredients, and I wanted it to not taste like cardboard, which is a pretty tall order for a dessert, right? And so I couldn't find it out there on the market. And so I just started making this stuff for myself in my home kitchen. So that stayed a hobby for a little while. I was just making sweet treats for myself to consume after dinner or on the weekend. But the point at which it switched into a business idea was when I was going on a business trip with the corporate job that I was still in at that time. And I had been told it was going to be super jam-packed days, not a whole lot of time to stop and take breaks and snack and things like that. And so I knew I needed some sort of like packaged grab and go snack that I could just throw in my bag and eat when I was popping from one meeting to the next. And so the night before this business trip, I went to the grocery store. I like beelined it for the energy bar aisle thinking this is going to be the perfect grab and go snack. And I must have walked up and down that energy bar aisle like 50 times, picking up every single energy bar, flipping it over, reading the ingredient list, and realizing there's nothing here that I want to consume. Everything is packed full of artificial additives, preservatives, or refined sugar. And so I left the grocery store that day empty-handed. I went home, pulled open the doors to my pantry, pulled out everything I thought would taste good in an energy bar, mixed it together, and kind of hoped for the best. So I bring this energy bar along with me on this business trip. And for those of you who have ever brought snacks with you on a business trip, you probably know what happens, right? You become the snack lady. And so everybody's coming to me for the snacks. And so I'm handing these things out like they're candy. And everyone else is loving them too. And that was the moment I realized, this is it. This is the thing I have been waiting for. So it took me about 3 months after that day, but eventually I handed in my resignation. I quit my corporate job cold turkey, and I jumped into the food industry with no investment dollars, no experience in the food industry, and no idea what I was doing at first. But I made it work. So it started out as a tiny health food bakery at a local farmers market here in London, Ontario. And eventually, over the first year of business, I transitioned it into a packaged energy bar company. And then with that energy bar company, I was able to scale to a national level. So we were supplying about 300 retailers coast to coast across Canada, including major grocery store chains. So it was cool. It was definitely the adventure of a lifetime. It was fun and rewarding and challenging and all the things that you would imagine building a packaged food business would be. And eventually I made the decision to pivot out of the food space and into the consulting and education space. So what I do now is I work with clients one-on-one to figure out how can we get your business from where it is today to where you want to see it go. What are all the steps that we need to account for in between? How do we reverse engineer this and pull in all the various puzzle pieces of your business and fit it all together to get you aligned with and driving your business forward in the direction that you want to see it go in? So that's what brings me to you today. So I led a team myself. We had in-house manufacturing and operations teams. And so I wanted to share with you guys today some of the key things that I used in leading my teams to get us through some of the challenging times that we went through as well. So I want to set the stage and talk about the landscape that we're currently in and that we're currently facing. I won't spend a whole lot of time here. I promise you this presentation is not going to be doom and gloom. Don't worry. This is one slide, but I do think that it's important we preface kind of what we're all going through. So it is a hard time right now. We're going through a very uncertain time. Things are constantly changing. It's really hard to stay on top of all of the changes that are happening. And supply chains are being pretty dramatically affected by these trade wars, right? So one of the most obvious things that's happening is the US tariffs. Now, this is affecting Canadian producers that were exporting to the US, right? So if you're a Canadian producer and you're exporting your product into the US, you are absolutely facing kind of that frontline challenge that we've all been hearing about in the news with regards to the US tariffs. An additional challenge that a lot of Canadian food producers are facing actually is the retaliatory tariffs. So in response to the US tariffs, Canada has now placed tariffs on things like fruits, nuts, grains, chocolate, sauces, a variety of raw ingredient materials that are being used inside of Canada from Canadian producers to produce and sell a product in Canada. So if you were importing any of those raw materials from the US into Canada, you will be facing some supply chain challenges. Additional to that, there has been pressure put on certain types of producers that are being caused by other tariffs as well. So Canada implemented a tariff on Chinese automotive manufacturers, and in response, China implemented a tariff on our canola oil. So now canola farmers are facing an additional challenge because 90% of canola oil in Canada is exported. And so if you were a canola oil manufacturer exporting this product to China, you're now going to face a challenge of not being able to do so effectively. And so if you are a producer that's using canola oil in your product to produce your product or to cook your product, you are going to face some challenges there. Additionally, we've got obviously the rising cost of raw materials that we are all facing right now. And of course, things like inflation, unemployment rates, and the resulting recession obviously also means that consumers are buying less. So this is the state of affairs right now, right? This is a pretty big challenge for us to all work through together. But here's the good news. It turns out that actually most successful businesses, or the most successful businesses, are built during the most difficult times. So 65% of Fortune 1000 companies were actually started during a recession. And so there's a reason for this. There's a reason that these companies have been so successful. And it's because when you're forged in fire, everything else feels easy, right? So if you take this akin to lifting weights, for instance, right? If you are bicep curling like 50-pound weights, that's going to be really, really difficult. And you're going to have a really hard time with it, unless you're, a bodybuilder or something. But if you're me, that's going to be very difficult. And so you're lifting these 50-pound weights and you can get a few reps in and you're like, man, this is so hard. And eventually you drop down those 50-pound weights and you pick up 5-pound weights and it feels like you're not even lifting anything. So the reality is that recessions don't last forever. Businesses go through seasons. And right now, the landscape that we're in is definitely a winter. We are going through a challenging time. There is no mistake about that. But winter doesn't last forever, right? Most of us are now in Canada experiencing some form of spring and some nicer weather. We are coming out the other side of it, and you too will come out the other side of these challenges, and you will be stronger for it. The other cool thing is that we can lead our teams through this challenge in a way that makes them come out the other side stronger and more resilient and better equipped to continue building this business alongside you. And so I want to share with you guys today a few key practices that you can do with your team during this challenging time to ensure that we all come out stronger together. So the first practice is that I want you guys to lead with courage. Lead with courage. And I know this sounds kind of challenging, but let me explain. So I want to do a poll. What I want to hear from you guys, we're going to launch a poll and we're going to list out a few different words. And I want you to choose from those words which ones you think best align with how you feel right now about the state of the economy. So if we could launch that poll, I want you guys to choose how you feel about the state of the economy right now. What kinds of feelings are you having? Okay, we'll give it just a minute here for people to respond so that we can get some ideas of how people are feeling about things right now. And then we're going to talk about how to turn those feelings into something productive. Okay. Okay. Hopefully you guys are answering.
Yeah, we've got some responses coming in. We're at 78% so far. So just a couple more responses.
Okay,
Close out.
amazing. Good stuff. And also to remind you guys as well, we will have a little bit of time at the end of the session too, for Q&A. So if you do have questions that you're thinking of as we go through the presentation, drop them into that Q&A function, because right at the end, that's where we'll pull the questions from to respond to.
Thank you, Nicole. And I think we're at 89%, so we get to close it off.
Okay.
All right, awesome. So here are the results.
Okay, amazing. So this does not surprise me too much here. So we've got fear, anxiousness, nonchalant, content, and hopeful were the choices. And overwhelmingly 72% of you said that you feel anxiousness with regards to the current economy and the current situation that we're going through. We've got some people that feel hopeful, which is great. I'm so happy to hear that, because we can feel hopeful coming out the other side of this, right? So this is what this whole presentation is about, is how can we turn that anxiousness into hopefulness? How can we take this situation that we're in and turn it into something positive? But I did want to mention to you guys that feeling anxious is totally normal. So when I ask people about the state of the economy and what words come to their mind right now about what's going on, oftentimes people will say things like concern, fear, uncertainty, they have hesitation, they're moving with caution, they're anxious about it for sure, absolutely, right? And so all of these emotions are totally normal. If you guys have heard of flight, fight, or freeze, or fight, flight, or freeze response, these are normal responses to a stressful and uncertain situation. But here's the problem. So even though it's normal for you as a person, as a human being, to feel anxious and fearful during this time, fear is contagious. And so if we show up with that bundle of nerves and that anxiety and that hesitation and that fear for our teams, they will also respond with a ton of fear. And what that's going to do is make all of us paralyzed. We're not going to be able to move, because you can't move and make decisions and be productive when you're sitting in fear. So fear is contagious, but so is courage. So is courage. And so the reality is that our team needs reassurance during this crisis. I remember starting out as a new leader, and in building your own business, and guys, like I obviously built my own food business, and you guys are building your own food businesses, you start out doing everything yourself, right? And then eventually you add one person to your team to help you produce this product to get it out there to the customers. And then when you and this other person get maxed out, you hire another person to help you produce this product to get it out to the customers. So you're kind of just feeling like, well, I'm just adding people to help me produce my products. And you don't realize, I didn't realize for a long time, oh, I'm the boss. I'm the leader. I'm the one that they are looking to see what we're supposed to be doing during this difficult time. So when all of your team is turning their head in your direction and they're looking at you, what they're looking for is reassurance that it's going to be okay and that we're going to get through it. What they don't want to see is you also freaking out. Even though, again, it's normal to freak out. You can freak out in private, but they don't need to see you freaking out. They're going to be looking to you again to tell them where we are going to go next. So that requires us to show up with courage and lead our team through this process. So how do you do this? So the first step in leading your team with courage is to stabilize the situation, right? We're in rocky, uncertain times. Everyone's feeling anxious. Nobody knows what's going on. There's a ton of uncertainty. So the first thing that your team needs from you is stability. No one likes uncertainty. Uncertainty is very uncomfortable for everyone. And I know we talk a lot in entrepreneurship about how we all have to learn how to live with uncertainty and manage uncertainty and deal with uncertainty. And we can do those things, but at the end of the day, no one is comfortable with it. So we need to stabilize. So in order to stabilize, what we want to do is, first off, acknowledge the situation. Your team knows there's stuff going on, right? They watch the news, they listen to things, they know what's happening. And so we need to acknowledge that this is in fact happening, this is real. But what I want you to do is stick to the facts, communicate honestly, and stay steady in your communication, right? We don't need to be guessing about what Trump is going to do next. Like that's not helpful to your team, right? What we want to do is stick with the facts and stick with what we know today. That might change tomorrow. And if it changes tomorrow, then we can update our team tomorrow and we can stick with the facts tomorrow. But we need to tell the team what the facts are today so that they know what's going on today. We need to, again, also be very honest in what's happening. Try not to sugarcoat things too much because it's going to come across as disingenuous to your team, while also don't lead again with fear, right? We want to establish clear priorities and we want to clearly communicate what the action plan is. So again, your team is looking to you to find out, okay, you've acknowledged what's going on. You've told us what the facts are. What are we going to do about it as a team? How are we getting through this, right? And so you need to ensure that they have an understanding of, we have a plan for how to deal with this. If you show up and you just say, yeah, this is what's going on, and they say, okay, what's the plan? And you're like, well, we're going to figure, like that's not going to instill confidence in your team, right? So we need to make sure that we are showing up and clearly communicating. We are working on an action plan. If you don't have it all sorted out yet, that's totally fine. Most people don't, but clearly communicate what your plans currently are and what your clear priorities are for tackling this plan. And then reassure them. Reassure your team that you are there to support them and answer any questions that they have. They will have questions, of course. Everybody is feeling uncertain during this time. They're going to have some questions, and they need to know that as a leader, you are going to be there to talk if they need to talk, that you're going to be there to answer their difficult questions if they have some. And so they need to know that you understand the situation, you have a plan, and that you are there to support them. Okay, practice number 2, trying to keep an eye on the time here because I know I get a little bit wordy and talkative here with these topics because I love talking about this stuff. So practice number 2 is that I want you guys to lead with vision. So everybody has heard the phrase, nothing brings people together like a common enemy, right? So I want to share with you guys a video here that further illustrates this idea.
Tavares in the far corner. Riley's still up there. And it's played for Shanny. Missed his pass, but Tavares keeps it going. And it's John Tavares behind the net. Coming out in front. John scores! John Tavares! They finally caught lightning in a bottle. And the Maple Leafs have broken the 19-year curse.
Okay, so here's what I was trying to get across to you guys in this video. So some of you might recognize this video. I apologize. I know that hockey is a hot button topic right now, and not everybody is a Leafs fan. So I am here to acknowledge that first and foremost. I know that there's probably some people that are like, oh man, those Leafs. But let me tell you, this was the 2023 playoffs. And Toronto Maple Leafs beat Tampa Bay Lightning in the playoffs, and they beat them in the playoffs. They beat somebody, anybody in the playoffs for the first time in 19 years. 19 years. That's almost 2 full decades, right? And you could see the excitement. You can see it in this image on the fans' faces. They were like, oh my God, it's been 19 years and we finally did it, right? And so this was everyone's excitement. It was the fans' excitement. It was the team's excitement. You could see the coaches, the manager, like everybody was just so pumped that they finally did it after 19 years of struggling. So how did they do this? It took them those 19 years. And through that time, through 2 decades, Leafs fans stayed loyal to their team the entire time. You ever talk to a Leafs fan and you say, oh, the Leafs never win, they will bring up this moment. Let me tell you, they will bring up this moment, right? And even during that period of time when they weren't winning, Leafs fans were like, it's coming. It is coming. Just you wait. It is coming, right? So Leafs fans were loyal the entire 19 years. Why? How did they do this? And how can we do this with our teams? So here's the thing. When you have, in psychological terms, when you have an in-group, so let's say Leafs fans, and you have an out-group, which is the other teams like Tampa Bay Lightning, let's say, this results in team loyalty. You get buy-in, right? So you have an in-group, you have an out-group. So this is the idea of the common enemy. The common enemy was Tampa Bay Lightning. The common enemy was every other team that they went up against in those 19 years. Your common enemy right now is the challenge that you are all facing together. The common enemy is the struggle through this time of uncertainty, through these tariffs, through the recession, through all of this. That is the common enemy. And this is how you rally the troops, right? So to stay resilient during this challenge, what you need to do is rally the troops against this common enemy, right, of this big challenge you are all facing together, and then give them a vision to work on together. Give them a direction to work on together. Tell them what the compelling future is if we can all just get past this challenge together. So I want to share, I have a few videos in this section. I want to share with you guys an example of a compelling future vision. Now this is, spoiler alert for anybody who wants to see Gladiator 2, this is a clip from the movie where we have a leader that is rallying the troops towards a compelling future vision.
I'm not a general, but we are all soldiers. And up until now, we have fought for nothing more than another day's survival.
What will you have us do?
Well, you can return to your cells if you do not wish to fight this battle. Or you can join me and fight for a freedom far beyond these walls.
There once was a time when honor meant something in Rome. In this Rome, I no longer believe that exists. We must find it. And know this, where death is, we are not. Where we are, death is not.
By my sword.
Strength another.
So, inspiring, right? He's saying, come with me as the leader, come with me to fight for a freedom beyond these walls. And then he goes on to further describe what that freedom looks like, a Rome where honor meant something, right? So we need to do this with our teams. Come with me and fight against this common enemy towards this future vision. So what we need to do is communicate, or if you've already communicated in the past what the future vision is, we want to re-communicate it, right? So we want to remind our teams of what we're all fighting towards. So communicate or re-communicate the bigger vision of what we are looking to achieve together as a team unit. So I have found that there's kind of 3 camps that leaders fall into in terms of how they communicate with their teams during a crisis. So the first one is, I would say, the bulk of leaders. What leaders usually will do during a crisis, what they usually will say during a crisis, is nothing. So I want to normalize this. This is not the best way to move forward, but I do want to normalize again that this is a freeze response. This is not, if you're a leader who has said nothing to your team yet, understand that that's normal because you are paralyzed with fear. So what we need to do, instead of kind of sticking our heads in the sand and saying, okay, hopefully this will just all blow over. Hopefully this will just go away and we just won't have to deal with it and it's going to be okay. The reality is we are going through this. Your team are probably dealing with some emotions and dealing with some fear during this time, and they need your leadership. And so this is definitely not the best way to go about it. Again, relatively normal response, but we need to push ourselves in the right direction. Now, here is what some leaders will say during a crisis. So this is the second out of 3 camps. So they will come to their team and they will say, okay, let's say, I had an energy bar company. So let's say, for instance, we have an energy bar company. So they might say, okay, guys, you know what? Things are kind of difficult right now, but we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep making energy bars and it's going to be okay. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us through this, and thank you for your hard work. So this is better than saying nothing. You're at least acknowledging the situation, and you're thanking them for sticking with you through it, but it's kind of uninspiring, right? So your team would probably walk away from a meeting like this saying like, okay, but like, what are we actually doing? What is the plan? Because I don't think that she gets that this is a pretty big problem that we're going to have to deal with at some point, right? And so it's uninspiring. It's not really motivating your team towards any significant action. And there really isn't any form of team cohesion. This is very much a boss telling the team, thank you so much for your hard work. And that's about it. Now, what great leaders say during a crisis is something along the lines of this. We are facing a challenge right now, but this challenge is not going to stop us from doing what it is that we do best, right? And it's not making energy bars. It's bringing real food to people in a convenient way. We are a strong team, and we're going to rise to this challenge together as a team. Now, here's the key bit, the vision. If we work together, we can scale this business across Canada, bringing real food to hundreds of thousands of people across this country. We have got this. Now, this achieves a few things. One, it inspires your team, right? It reinvigorates everybody to say like, okay, this is hard. She acknowledges that it's hard. She acknowledges that we're all going through this. She has a plan and we're gonna move forward and let's go. We've got this, right? It enhances that team cohesion. Notice how many times in this statement I said we or us, right? We're doing this together. We have got this. We are facing a challenge. We are a strong team and we will rise together, right? So it creates that team cohesion and it lets your team know they are not alone. They're not alone in this. You are here to walk with them through this. And again, it realigns us all with the vision of what we are trying to achieve despite these difficult times. Now, I have one more video to further illustrate this idea. This video is a commercial that the Toronto Maple Leafs came out with in 2021. So it took them 19 years in 2023 to win again. And so this was 17 years into their losing streak, okay? 2021 before they won.
Whatever you do, don't blink. In an unprecedented time, something unprecedented is bound to happen. So just be present for this one moment, a moment we've all been waiting for. Make it worth every sacrifice, every bump, every bruise, every breath. Make it worth its weight so we can own every single second. Let it unite us forever. Don't blink. Not yet.
Okay, so you can see in that video that not only did they say, let it unite us, right? Let it unite us. This is the moment we've all been waiting for, right? And then at the end, Leafs Forever, they are creating this team cohesion towards a future vision and against a common enemy. So this is how you rally the troops and get through 17, 19 years of a losing streak. This is how you rally the troops and get through a difficult time and keep your team on board with that vision. Okay, so the last practice here, and we're gonna wrap this up in the next 10 or so minutes. So we have a few moments for some questions before we end. So what I want you to do is lead with empathy. So understandably, your team is going to have concerns during this time, right? And I think that sometimes as leaders, as food entrepreneurs, we are trying to build a business and we are super scrappy because it's hard to make margins. It's hard to make any profit. We are rolling up our sleeves. We're getting into the dirt and we are just trying to build this thing. And so it's really, really easy to think about all the ways that you are going through challenges right now. But we can't forget about our teams, right? You might be an entrepreneur, you might be a food producer, you might be the salesperson and the marketing person and everything else in between, but you are also at the same time, you are a leader. And we need to make sure that our team is okay as well, right? So understandably, of course, you have concerns and so does your team. So your team is going to have concerns like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do during this time? What's going to happen? And the reality is, so most of us, myself included, have been on the other side of this. We have been team members for other people in the past, and we've gone through challenging times ourselves. And we know that our team is asking this question behind the scenes, even if they're not asking it of us, they're asking it of each other. They're asking it in their own heads, right? And so if you've been a team member in the past, you know that you've turned to your colleagues and said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do here, right? Is this company going to go bankrupt? Will I still have a job in a few months? How are we going to get through this? So just like your fears are normal, as we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, a lot of you have anxiousness around this situation. Your fears are normal and your team's fears are very normal, right? So leading with empathy means treating your team members in the way that you would want to be treated during this time. So I have been a team member at two separate organizations during two separate times in my career that have gone through mass layoffs. And the first time I went through this process, the leaders, we were in a team meeting and the question was asked, okay, things are not looking great right now. Does this mean that there will be some layoffs? And the leadership team, because they were afraid of what it would mean if they were honest and transparent, decided to say, no, there will not be any layoffs. We do not plan on cutting any staff. And the next week, they went through their first round of layoffs. And what happens when you're in that situation and your leadership is not open and honest and transparent is that your team starts to worry that they will be next. And then that creates mass panic. That's not what we want. Now, the opposite has also happened where I was in an organization that was going through mass layoffs, and the leader was as transparent as they possibly could be given the situation. And so they said up front, we're not 100% certain what this means for everyone, but we will have to right size our workforce. There will be some layoffs coming. We don't know again exactly what that looks like, but we will keep you apprised of the situation as we know more, and we will always be open and honest and transparent with you. And that is so much more appreciated, right? Because again, coming from the team member's perspective, putting yourself into your team member's shoes, you would want to have as much information as you could have. You would want your leader to be open and honest with you as far as they were possibly capable of doing so. So you want to make sure that you are addressing both their spoken concerns, things that they are saying in a forward way to you, and their unspoken concerns, right? So those questions that I just went through, they will be asking those questions. Is there going to be a business tomorrow? Am I going to have a job tomorrow? Even if they are not coming to you and asking those questions, they are probably thinking it and they're probably discussing it amongst themselves. So it's really important that you be as open and honest in addressing those concerns as you possibly can be. Again, stick with the facts. Right? So don't start to guess about what's going to happen in if Trump imposes these tariffs and he actually goes through with it, then that's going to look like probably having to lay off, half our staff. Don't do that, because that's just guesswork, right? Stick with the facts, stick with what you know today. Based on what we know today, here's what our plans are, and here's what this is looking like for us. This is an ongoing, ever-evolving, changing situation, and we will keep you apprised of the information as we receive it and as we know what's going on. So stick with the facts, be as transparent as possible, but please, guys, don't lie to hide the hard truths, because this will eventually backfire. Treat your team members with as much empathy and respect and trusting them with this information as you possibly can, so that you can all try to get through this together. Now, one cool thing that you can do with regards to this challenge is you can actually leverage this challenge to help your team build a whole bunch of confidence and resilience. So I think that a lot of people think that confidence and resilience are things that you are simply born with. They're skill sets, they're stable character traits that you either have or you don't have. And going through the process of building several businesses now, I have realized that this is absolutely not the case, that confidence and resilience truly come from a state of doing difficult things, trying to do them, perhaps making mistakes along the way, figuring it out, learning, and eventually overcoming that challenge and succeeding. That is how you build confidence. So this is not necessarily a work-related illustration, but I think a really poignant one nonetheless. So I'm a hiker. I love hiking, but I didn't always hike. And I had gone on when I was a very amateur, very, very novice hiker. I had no idea what I was doing. I had gone unwittingly on a very challenging hike in Hawaii, thinking that it was just going to be like moderate, relatively easy. And going through that hike, I was very insecure about how I was doing things. I felt not a whole lot of confidence in where to place my feet to make sure I didn't slip and fall off the side of a mountain. And so I was very hesitant and very unconfident. But I got through that hike. It took me like a full 8 hours, but I finally got through that hike. And I came out the other side of it and I realized, if I could get through that hike, that like pretty challenging hike that's rated pretty high, if I could get through that hike, then surely I could do this one. And so my confidence level went up, right? Confidence comes from trying things that you haven't tried before, kind of not being the best at it, figuring it out, learning, and then coming out the other side successful eventually. So what you can do during this challenge is empower your team to be innovative and offer some creative solutions to the problems that are being presented. You are not trying to unload a burden of responsibility onto your team's shoulders. That's not what I'm suggesting you do. But I am suggesting that if you have something where you could potentially elicit some input from your team members and get some creative solutions, that now is a perfect time to do that, because they will feel like, okay, I'm going to take on this challenge and I'm going to try to see it through. And then as they try to work through it, what you want to do is support them with some encouragement and some ideas of your own, help to kind of guide them through it. And as they go through it and they come out the other side successful, you can uplift them by acknowledging once they have made an achievement. So start with small things. Start with small things that your team can handle right now, but offer them the ability to give some input into what you are doing, and be creative and be innovative. And it will allow them to build that confidence in themselves and come out the other side of it a much more resilient person, seeing that when they are faced with hard things, when they are faced with challenges, they can and will overcome. Okay, so that is wrapping up the presentation. I did want to leave you guys with some contact details here, just in case you did want to get in touch. So again, I'm a business and leadership consultant. My Instagram is It's Nicole Haney. You can find me on LinkedIn under my name. That's where I'm spending most of my time nowadays. And my website is NicoleHaney.com. So if you do want some help with your business and walking through how to get your business from where it is today to where you want to see it go, and leading this team through this challenge that we're all facing, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk with you about what that might look like.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. Okay, so I think now we can move on to our Q&A. So I do have a couple of questions in. I do want to just also mention the Q&A will stay open. So if you guys start thinking of follow-up questions or things that you want to submit, please feel free to do so. Okay, so we can get started with some, if that's okay, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, let's go. So I have a anonymous question here came in, and we'll go by the order if they're submitted. So it says, did you or your organization go through a phase of simply surviving and from an outside perspective, doing little to nothing? What happened after that time of adjustment, assessment, or rest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, absolutely. So, starting a startup business, when you are going from like 0 to 3 years or 0 to 5 years in some cases, it is the most challenging time that you will face in growing your business. And a lot of times it looks from the outside looking in, it looks like you're not making any traction. But that's because you're just trying to figure out how to get your business set up, how to operate in a highly regulated industry, how to manufacture a product, how to speak with retailers in a way that actually converts them into paying clients, how to position your product on the market. You're trying to figure out everything. What to post to Instagram, right? And so from the outside looking in, it might look like you're not doing a whole lot, because it's kind of that analogy of the duck sitting on top of a pond, and the duck looks super serene, but underneath the water line, you can see his legs are like going like this, trying to like get it all together, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily call that a period of rest. I would call that a period of focusing on your operations and focusing on getting everything set up to support the very visible, very public growth that you're about to have. And so I would say if you're going through that period of time, it's not easy. It's not easy, because for sure you're going to feel like people are looking at you and saying, what is this person even doing? They're not even getting out there. But rest assured that once you have things set up and things are in place to support the growth of your business, you will be able to then launch into the market and really hit the ground running.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that answer. I think also to your analogy about the duck swimming above water, like it's kind of like how the organizations look like too. Like everything seems in order, but you have HR running in the background, you have marketing trying to scout for the new things, guidelines, and things coming up. So that's very true, I think, to the experience that happens here. However, in terms of like assessing that period, what's like the good lens of also looking at that and really like in a sense of, when I have my rest days, am I resting too much? Or is there like more room for me to grow and how do I lead with that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So, as an entrepreneur, honestly, it becomes really difficult to find any semblance of balance. And I actually don't love the term balance because it assumes that everything is equal. And it's not, honestly, and the honest answer is it's never going to all be equal. But what I suggest instead is making sure that you're aligning the time you're spending with your priorities, right? So I actually was walking a group through this exercise yesterday of looking at what are the biggest priorities in your life and how much are you making those things a priority? How much time are you committing to them? So a practice you can do is splitting up a piece of paper into five categories. So like work, family, friends, personal interests, health, things like that. And then going through all those categories and figuring out from 1 to 5, how important is this to you? And then going back through it and figuring out from 1 to 5, how much time are you committing to that thing? And so when you have a rest day, it's not being lazy. A rest day is resting to improve, let's say, your mental health. Well, if your mental health is really important to you, then good on you for taking a rest day to prioritize that, right? And so it's all a very personal equation, I think, as to how much rest is enough rest for you versus somebody else. It's all going to be very personal and very different.
Yeah, I really like that approach that you had about the priorities because I think if you have somewhat of a priority matrix, then you can actually figure out where you're resting and what you're resting for. Because at least for me, I think rest is very important, but also it's something with a purpose in a sense. So we always got to be kicking below the water, I guess, in that sense. And thank you so much for sharing that. Um, Okay, so there's another question here from an anonymous source as well. So it reads, how can you acknowledge and celebrate the resilience of your team?
Yeah, so great question. I would say acknowledging them publicly, like inside of a team meeting, right? So with my last business, we would do weekly team meetings. And in gathering your team, you could say, Joanne, she actually, I know you guys know, Joanne was working on this project and trying to figure this thing out, right? And this was not an easy task to take on. This is a really challenging thing that, I struggled with and had trouble with myself when I had been working on this in the past. And so Joanne took this on. And man, did she ever just blow it out of the water. Like she went ahead and just absolutely crushed it despite the challenges that she was facing. And so I want to acknowledge Joanne today for all of her hard work and really putting in the effort to do this because like now she has done it and like this is an amazing thing for our team.
Yeah, that's a really good way to do it. I've seen some accolades in the past given for like these weekly meetings in my company previously. They do like a bit like a badging where they give you kind of like these terms and words that are very general, but it's nice to have like champions for let's say resilience or adaptability or humor even. Like there's these features that we have as human beings that we obviously sometimes lose out on when we're working, and they are really important because that's the human connection that we form in order to figure out our priorities, work together, figure out how we get things and solve solutions. So I think that's a really good practice to have. And do you think that having a weekly meeting, like obviously there's organizations that are very big and some that are smaller in size. So how do you kind of manage that across different functional teams and how do you create somewhat of a cohesive resilience culture, let's say, or recognition of skills in that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that good leadership really comes from the top and then works its way down, right? And so as the top of the food chain here, the top leader, you have to then filter down the messaging that you want to get out and all of the values that you want to get out to your team members through maybe your functional leaders as well, right? So I think that it is having meetings with those functional leaders to really clarify like what are our values, what's our vision, like what are we working towards, what things do we want to acknowledge and celebrate, right? What are some of our challenges, and kind of working with your team leaders to instill those values and make sure that they really are embedded in the culture of the organization, and then having those team leaders filter it down to the team members as well.
Yeah, and I think in a roundabout way, like just acknowledging and celebrating the resilience is one way that you can also bake a much better organizational culture and grow that in different branching kind of ways with that kind of approach of organizing it with your functional team. So I think that answers a lot more than just that. And thank you so much for sharing that. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, Anything else you want to elaborate on there before we move on to the next question?
No, I don't think so. I think that was pretty good. Like I love these questions because you guys are asking like how can we better support our teams, which is the exact feeling that I was hoping you would get from this is like yes, this is challenging and yes, this is hard and let's make sure that we are supporting our teams through this and not only kind of like hanging on and surviving through this crisis, but also like how can we help our teams thrive through this crisis and really uplift them and help them build that confidence and that resilience, right?
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think there's I'm going to go off order here, but there's a question that kind of segues on that, so I'll ask this next. The question reads, and this is from an anonymous source as well, but it reads, what are some meaningful questions to ask in a performance review as a resilient leader? So, assuming there's touch bases that also come into that, and we want to show resilience. So, I'm sure that's not happening in the functional meetings that we were discussing before, but what are some of your tips that you have on performance reviews specifically? Because I think that's an interesting piece as well for me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So, I believe in really having a very open and transparent culture. And so I think that a lot of these performance evaluations, and if you have to have difficult situations and conversations with your team members, the starting place for that happens before you have those meetings. And so it really is about establishing that culture up front where team members feel comfortable having these conversations with you, and being open and honest about some of their challenges. Because how can you have a conversation about resilience if people won't share with you what their challenges are, right? The whole idea of resilience is being able to come out the other side of a challenge successfully and kind of bounce back. And so you have to have team members that feel comfortable sharing those challenges with you. So I think in a performance evaluation, it's asking like, what have some of your key challenges been over, the last quarter or the last year, however often you're doing it? What have some of your challenges been? And then how did you overcome some of those challenges, right? And so asking very like pointed questions around resilience with regards to, okay, I had this challenge, but I didn't kind of just drop it and do nothing with it. I had this challenge and I saw my way through it and I kind of figured it out and I tried this thing, but this thing didn't really work that well. And so what I learned though from that is this, right? And so being able to say, what were the challenges? What did you learn from those challenges? How did you utilize those learnings to move forward further and get closer to the goal? And what were some of your successes that you achieved through that process?
Okay, that's awesome. So in a way, is it like better to rather explore and create a body around how this stuff is addressed for the perspective of your employees or whoever you're speaking to within that performance review, rather than coming in maybe with some comments that you hear from another department or some notes that you've taken yourself personally, right? Like there's a lot of that I've personally even had in some performance reviews, but you're absolutely right. A lot of these things seem to be hidden more from my experience. And if I don't get the comfort or space to talk about them, then knowing's half the battle in this case for the both of us, right? In that relationship. So never really thought of it that way, but that's really interesting.
I wanted to add
Please
one
go
more
ahead.
thing,
Please.
and because I think this is a really interesting part of that conversation is I can't remember who said this. I wish I could remember right now, but it's somebody who is very well known.
Mhm.
But this person had said that failure was normalized in their, I think it might have been Sarah Blakely, but failure was normalized in their household because instead of sitting down at the dinner table and her dad asking, how was your day? And having like the normal conversation, she's 10 and her dad is saying, what did you fail at today? that was the conversation that was had every single night at the dinner table. What did you fail at today? And not in a negative sense, not like, tell me all your failures, in a positive sense, because failing is a positive thing. You fail at something, and that means that you can learn from it. And then you can take those lessons and apply it to trying again to that same thing, and eventually you find success, which is like the definition of being resilient, right? Being able to bounce back from those failures. And so normalizing failure in her household, I believe it was Sarah Blakely, was a way that she was able to then go into business and be successful, because she knew that failing wasn't the end of the line, right?
Yeah, completely agree. And I think there's the whole concept of you fail up in a business or like in anything that you do, because like there is room to go up whenever you fail, right? Even
Yeah.
when you hit rock bottom, you can always consider these things. And that's a really good note to take. I'm kind of curious who said it now, because I'm going to try and see if that's in a book or something I can grab. So
Yeah, for sure. I believe it was Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, but don't quote me on that.
no worries. All right. Thank you, Nicole. That's awesome. And then now kind of going into another question here. It says, what are some of your personal tips on managing fear at a personal level so that it doesn't affect my team slash organization?
On a personal level, okay, so this is the biggest thing around fear, the biggest myth around fear is that people that take action and have courage don't have fear. And that is not true. Like, there is not a way to eradicate fear. Fear is a very normal psychological response to uncertainty, to difficulties, to facing the pretty real and major challenges that we're currently facing, right? You will not eradicate your fear. So I think that is the starting place of saying, like, it's normal to have fear, and you're going to have to be able to sit with it and be okay with it, and not then stop it or allow it to stop you, allow it to stop you from then leading in the ways that you want to lead, right? And so it is a decision to decide, okay, I'm feeling really afraid, but I have a responsibility to my team to show up as the leader that they need me to be today. And so I need to set this aside for now. I need to show up as this leader in order to effectively lead them. And so I think in terms of managing fear, like, part of it is understanding that you've been through difficult things in the past, right? Like, we've all been through hardships. I don't think anybody comes out of life unscathed. Everybody has gone through something very difficult, and you're still here, right? I saw a video the other day that was saying something like, you have survived 100% of the difficult things that you have been through because you're still here. And so knowing that you are capable of getting through this, I think is a big part of what allows me to keep driving through fear, is like, this too shall pass. Like, this is hard, and I am afraid, and I am uncertain, but I've been through periods before where I was afraid and uncertain, and I got through those things, and we will get through this as well.
Yeah, and do you think that like when you're framing that perspective around your fear, because obviously between you yourself at a personal level, waking up, looking at a mirror and like having that fear going into work or taking that into your car and so on and so forth, like, are there any steps in terms of not just like maybe the instillment of trust and like being there for sure, but is there like something in terms of maybe compartmentalizing or rationalizing some of the aspects of that fear that maybe help? Like, what are some steps that people can take when they're having like maybe a bit of a moment with the panics at a high before you go through the door into a meeting, right? Or
Yep.
what are some of maybe personal tips from you that you face? Because obviously you were talking about the very diverse range of challenges that you're having with your business. So what was maybe something that you can have as a personal tip there as like an immediate thing? I'd be curious about that. I could
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. 100%. There's so many things. And like, fear is definitely something that I've had to work my way through from the ground up, that's for sure. So the first thing is like, reducing the physical anxiety, I think, is really important. So things like box breathing, so breathing in for a period, holding, and then breathing out slowly for a period of seconds, can really help to like just physically calm your nervous system. Because a lot of times when we do have these fears, it translates from fear, which is a mental piece, into anxiety, which is physiological. And so what we want to do is try to reduce or quiet some of that physiological response so that we can move forward correctly and like in the ways that we want to. So reducing the physiological response through breathing, meditation, like there's a bunch of different things that you can do to calm your nerves. And then in terms of rationalizing, the biggest thing that was a game changer for me was think this, not that. And so if you're having a limiting belief, then you have this kind of like thought, this fear, this worry, this concern that's like swirling around in your head. And instead of allowing it to take over, acknowledging that it's a limiting belief and switching to thinking this over here instead, right? So choosing an empowering belief instead to kind of get you through. So an example from my personal life, a fear that I had a lot in growing my first business is, what if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work, right? And so taking that like limiting belief of what if this doesn't work and changing it into an empowering belief of, if I work hard enough and I really like put my mind to it and I am determined and I'm gritty and I am resilient, I will find a way to make this work, right? So think this, not that. Changing your mind frame, I think, can help a lot as well.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that's really a very important thing about emotions in general. Perception and framing it is a really powerful way to kind of gauge that. And more often than not, just to your note about physiological, like that's the kind of stuff that is very evident to your employees and organization, right? Like you might be all good up in here and you've got that fine. You might be speaking in a nice temperament, but your hands might be shaking. You might be nervous and like grasping at things. And that might instill some of those emotions to your employees. And you were saying how they could mirror some of those things, and it's very important to gauge those emotions. So thank you so much for sharing those tips there. I'll definitely be using some of those myself. So thanks. Now, I do realize that we're a bit over time, so I just want to mention that to everybody on the call. Thank you guys so much for sticking along. And Nicole, do you have a few more minutes just to take up a couple more questions?
For sure. I do have to jump off in a couple minutes, but we probably have time for one more question.
Awesome. That's all that's here, so that's great. Okay. So then we have the last one. How do you set and achieve personal goals when faced with limited resources or support?
Yeah, that's a great question for a group of entrepreneurs for sure. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I think this is where we need to get really creative, right? And so it really is finding creative solutions to do the things you want to do or get close to doing those things that you want to do within your, let's say, budget, right? Limited resources. We're usually talking about money. So I had a bootstrap startup, and with a bootstrap startup comes very limited financial resources. So one of the examples that I have for this was when I was looking to switch to commercial packaging from like a stock package, right? So just a plain package. I was, just like all of you on the call, doing the awful peel and stick of those labels onto your stock package. And I know it sucks, but it doesn't last forever, I promise you. And so I got into probably like somewhere between 70 and 80 retailers. And then I started to get a little bit of pushback on my packaging, on people saying like, this product is amazing, but the quality of the packaging does not reflect the quality of the product. And we don't feel comfortable putting this product on our store shelves in its current package. And so that was the tipping point where I knew I needed to source a much more commercial package, a much more professional looking package. But in order to do so, the MOQs of the type of packaging that I was looking for were so high that I was going to have to invest about $36,000 to get my first order of commercial packaging, which I didn't have $36,000, right? We had a budget of probably about $15,000 to make this happen. So nowhere near. I tried to get some debt financing to make it happen. That wasn't going to happen. Got declined for a business loan. Went back and got a business loan eventually, guys. Don't worry. But at that time, we weren't at the point to get one. So I had to figure out, how do I do this? Because I can't keep moving forward in my business with this very grassroots packaging, if you will, is a nice way to say it. I need professional packaging, but I don't have the money to do it. And I can't seem to source the money to do it. So how am I going to do what I want to do with the budget I currently have? And so what I ended up doing was taking the next step in the process. I took a look at what it was I wanted. I wanted a plain white matte package that had a professionally designed logo on it. And so I sourced a plain white matte package that was a stock package. I hired a graphic designer to design professionally the logo and the label. I then took that label and sent it to a professional sticker printing company. They printed those stickers, and then I was able to do still the peel and stick, I know, but I still did the peel and stick, but because the matte white of the sticker matched the matte white of the package, you could barely tell there was a sticker on it. It looked a lot more professional. Was it exactly what I was hoping to do? No, but we got a lot closer. And because we got a lot closer, we were able to go out, secure more retailers to then be able to be more profitable, go back to the bank, get the funding we needed to then get the commercial packaging that we wanted to start rolling with. So it ended up working out. But yeah, I think you have to get really crafty and really gritty and really creative with like, how am I going to achieve what I want to achieve, but on a lower budget?
Yeah. That's thank you so much for sharing that. That's really interesting and really good way of showing how the will becomes a way. That's awesome. So thank you so
For
much for
sure.
that, Nicole. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for our questions. So I would just like to thank you, Nicole, so much for taking the time to present all of these wonderful insights here. And I would also like to take a moment to thank all of our wonderful participants for joining today. Thank you guys so much for being here this afternoon, and we apologize for going over time a bit, but we will have the call recording sent to you, and you guys can access these details. So yeah, thank you guys so much for your time here. I'll leave it to Tracy for some closing comments.
Thank you, Nicole. That was really interesting and really insightful. And you really helped me. You hear resilience and leadership all the time, but you never really think, you kind of have an idea, but you never really think of how do you actually do it and put it into practice? And what are some steps that you can constantly refresh and keep recycling back just to do that to, for yourself and for your team. So that it's, knowing that it's a flow down to everyone else if you can be a resilient leader yourself. As Mario mentioned, we are sending the link of the webinar recording and to our FPSC YouTube channel, and we will also give you a copy of the presentation, and we'll be sending that out in the next day or two. Please join us again in May for our next Speaking Food webinar, and thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your rest of your day, and we'll see you guys later. Take care.